you don't respect people who have different views, what will you fail to do? You're just going to set it.
Get along.
Get along. I guess even for survival, yeah.
You fail to grow up.
You fail to grow. I wouldn't encourage you to grow up. That's a trap, by the way. But to grow, absolutely. Remember, this is not you. This is you. This thing that your body is, it's a vehicle. It's nice. Sometimes it's faster. Sometimes it's slower. Sometimes it feels like it's going to fall apart in any second. Believe that. But this is the thing that's you. And so by respecting other views, this is tantamount to respecting an individual. Because that's what you are. You're a collection of views. So you get that question, well, why should you respect people? Because there's no positive reason not to. There's no positive reason not to. Meaning, well, but people have stupid views. Doesn't mean I should disrespect them? No. Because, again, those views are the person. That doesn't mean that you have to accept every view and agree with every view. Just like you don't have to accept and agree with every person. But when you attack someone's views, one horrible thing is that you're attacking the actual person themselves. And not just, again, we're talking about the psychological structure that encapsulates this person. You're attacking the actual, essential spiritual soul that they are. We don't necessarily think of it that deeply on the surface, but that's what's going on at this unconscious level. Remember, the belief systems that you have work for you. They function for you. It's one of those horrible things that we do when we enforce these kind of generational divides between, young people. Well, you know what? Your music sucks. Your culture sucks. And we walk away. But then again, won't the exact same thing be said about older people? Well, your culture sucks. Your music sucks. And the old people are like, you know why? Because you'll understand when you're older. And that's always the cop-out. Because I don't have to prove it. I can just, I'm not going to know you in 30 years. So I don't have to sit there and say, you'll understand when you're older. Because, again, that's like whenever, like if I have a parent conference and parents will ask me, Dr. Scanlon, do you have children? And I say, none that I know of, but the 2000s were a crazy time. Well, then you'll... It's not the point of the story. Well, so you'll understand if you had kids. You'd understand. And then my answer is always, I'm sorry, Mr. Sutton, do you have children? Of course you do. You know what? You would understand if you didn't have children. That's the stuff that we put up as a barrier, so that way we don't have to talk about it anymore. You'll understand when you're older. You don't understand because of your particular situation. We can understand everything. If an idea is an idea, if it's something non-physical, then that means we can process it, which means we can understand anything. You don't have to experience it to understand it. Well, you have to experience it in the physical world. You can experience it up here, and if you work it out in your head, you can come to grips with it in a very strong way. Now, if you do both, you experience it and you process it intellectually, well then, yeah, you can understand it at a much deeper level. But just because you experience something physically doesn't mean that you completely understand it. Now, I'll say that again. Just because you experience something physically doesn't mean you understand it. A psychologist who has 20 or 30 years of clinical experience but has never been depressed understands depression in a way that a depressed person doesn't understand it. Because you can get your mind around things with enough thinking, enough intellectual work. And again, so when we say, well, you don't understand because you haven't been there, that's just a way of trying to shut down the conversation because we don't like analysis. Because any level of analysis is an attack on us. Again, that Socratic spiritual sense, Socratic intellectual sense. So the way that you operate right now, however it is, it works for you. If it didn't work for you, you wouldn't be here right now. You wouldn't be alive. So we form these views. We behave in certain ways in the world because it's effective for keeping us alive to the point that it has so far. So any kind of an attack on that, on our views, is an attack on our very existence. And this is why we respond so vehemently. This is why when I say something like, Five Guys is better than In-N-Out, some people will react very vehemently to that. It's a cheeseburger, man. Who cares? Well, you're just wrong, though. Geez, you really internalized this idea of the cheeseburger. So maybe what we should do is be very careful about the kinds of things that we make about us. Maybe cheeseburger shouldn't be part of it. Maybe cheeseburger shouldn't be one of those things. Maybe cheeseburger is something that I should relegate down here to something that's nice to experience, but it doesn't compose who I am. Maybe what we should be really careful about is only having things up here that reflect values, doctrines, however we understand those things, ethics or morals, or spiritual things. In other words, the things that really do matter in this world. And I mean matter in the sense that we hold value for them, whatever they are. And again, for some people, it will be a cheeseburger because they're a chef. Perhaps. So, first off, it's respecting views because of that. Because by doing this, you're respecting the actual individual. And every single individual deserves respect. Even just based on the grounds that there's no reason that they don't. Well, what if they do terrible stuff? Don't we all? Some just get further along in that than the rest of us. A second reason for it would be that if you don't respect views, then you're never going to hear them. So, for example, I was telling and I was as an undergraduate, one of my teachers, people who I consider to be my teachers, I've talked about him a few times. His name is Justice Richards, Richards. People ask me why I don't insist on being called Dr. Scanlon, because Mr. Richards has 3 doctorates. He has a PhD in philosophy, he has an MD, a medical degree from Johns Hopkins University, one of the top medical schools in the world. He also has a medical degree from a Chinese medical school. So the guy's got 3 doctorates, and he goes by Mr. Richards. At the very same school, there's a guy down the hall named Mr. Ricards. Sorry. I don't want to mess that up. It's Dr. Ricards. On the first day of class, he explains to us, my name is Dr. Ricards. If you're looking for Mr. Richards, he's down the hall. I am Dr. Ricards. If you're looking for Mr. Richards, you're in the wrong classroom. And the whole semester goes like that. He's very big on being Dr. Ricards. And he has a very stern personality type. He does not, his approach is not conducive to classroom discussions. He isn't just that guy who maybe you'll be a little bit intimidated because you're not sure what you could possibly add to it because he is a smart dude. But it goes further than that. He would chastise us and ask us, come on, what are your questions? And he would just kind of pull and pull. He'd get angry if you didn't. I would always ask questions to him, but I think I was the only person in class who did. And it all came from this one incident, I remember, where a girl finally just goes, well, what does ex nihilo nihilo fit mean? Because it's a Latin phrase that's in our text. It means nothing comes from nothing. And so he asks, are there any good questions? So, exactly. And he said, are there any questions that you need me to answer that you can't open up your book and look at the very first page and get the answer to? Which tells me you never got past that first page of reading. And then he goes over to his grade book. He says, I guess that's why you have a C in the class. Exactly. So, what questions do you have? Who's ready to ask a question now? Nobody. No one's ready to ask a question. Now nobody wants to. And then, of course, we wouldn't ask questions, so he would get it in his head. These are stupid kids. These guys, they don't understand what they're reading. They have no interest in intellectual development because they're not engaging the material. They're not asking questions. I got along with him really well, actually, surprisingly, because I asked him. He marked me off on something on a test, and I went to talk to him about it because I wanted to understand why it was wrong. It wasn't really wrong. I can look back on it. Even then, I said at the time, the question was asked badly. I answered the question he asked. I didn't answer the question that he wanted me to answer, if this makes sense. So at one point, he finally just cuts me off and said, listen, Scout, I'm not changing your grade. And I said, I'm not asking you to change my grade. I'm asking you to explain it to me so I understand it. And so he says, oh, okay. And he goes through, and after that, we got along pretty well. I still think he's an asshole. I would never hang out with him. I would never go get lunch with him. But, for what, I kind of use him like the Vikings use Newfoundland, right? You show up, get what you want, and you leave. That's how I treated his class. I just treated him like a shaved monkey. And I still think of him that way. He's a clown. Because either he doesn't know that this guy has, 3 times the PhDs that he has, or he hopes that we don't realize it at all. But this is my guy right here, Richards. And it's fantastic because you will not find a picture of him online. the guy's a ghost, man. There's a long story about why, but he's an amazing human being, this guy. Anyway, this is a guy who does not respect views. And because he doesn't respect views, it becomes impossible for him to learn from anyone, and it becomes impossible for us to learn from him, really. I mean, I didn't really learn much from him specifically. I learned a lot from the course because I just read the books and everything. But I didn't really learn a whole bunch from him. He was just there to grade exams, I guess. But if you don't respect views, you're not going to respect people. And if you don't respect people, you're going to treat them correspondingly. You're going to treat them as though you don't respect them. Sorry. You'll treat them disrespectfully. I guess we'll say that. It's difficult to do this. And that's why the doctrines that we hold are so important right now. People make jokes, and the jokes are problematic. You're not supposed to say that. That you're a terrible person for making certain jokes. Well, then you're going to treat them accordingly. You can't have that view. That view is outdated. You're going to treat people accordingly. If we disagree with people, we think that they're just evil. They're just, not just that they're incorrect, but that they're evil, terrible people. Because of the doctrines that we hold today, whether you realize it or not, man, we've just replaced religious views, which a lot of you don't have, with these social political views. It all operates the exact same way. When you look at religious structures and then you look at the thought structures of today, they operate exactly the same way. And that's just an anecdotal observational view. When we connect people to devices, we can see that your brains actually operate the exact same way when you're talking about religion as when you're talking about wokeism. You're talking about the kinds of social political views that people have, your brain lights up exactly in the same places as when you're talking about your religious views. And of course that becomes dangerous now, because what happens if you hold a particular religious view that people are going to hell? Well, you're going to treat them accordingly. They're anathema. They have to be cast out. There's no redemption for them. And then what happens if you hold that view? Well, you're never going to grow. You just become, you get everybody out of your life who has different views, and then that means that whatever views you have just continually get strengthened, but they're not really strengthened in the sense that they can stand up against scrutiny, which means that as soon as one person comes in with a little pin and goes, oh, I got through your filters, have you ever thought about this? Everything blows up. And now your whole place in the universe, the you, all deflates. So what can we do? Well, we can only react in the way that we kind of feel that it is, which is that they've attacked our very being, our essence. They have to be burned at the stake. They have to be destroyed. They have to be ostracized from society because they've attacked my very existence in the universe. Maybe not in a physical sense right now, but in a much worse way, which is a psychological sense. And so we have to be very careful about the doctrines that we hold to be unquestionable. There really shouldn't be any. Because if a doctrine that you hold is really strong, it should stand up to questions. This was Socrates' point. If your whole society can't stand up to the questioning of one old man, it's only worth paying $100 fine for it. If Socrates was wrong, if he was so subversive, he should be able to stand up to scrutiny. But he couldn't. In fact, they didn't even challenge him. He never even got past the point of him just asking other people, what do you believe and why? Well, you don't believe these things? I didn't say whether I did or didn't. I'm asking why you do. Oh, so you must be on the Spartan side. So you're against us. This guy wants to kill us all. We should kill him fast. You see it happen today. We don't even take the time to find out why people think what they think. We just jump on them. And especially once the mob jumps on you, man, forget about it. So we can only be absolutely certain about things we don't understand. Because if you really understood your positions, you'd understand the weaknesses of it. If you're a Christian, I hope you understand the weaknesses of Christianity. And not just in the moral sense, but in the archaeological sense, in the historical sense. If you're a Muslim, I hope that you really have to try to explain why it is that the Quran says that the sun sets in a pool of jelly every night. We know that it doesn't. So how do you rationalize that? There are ways of getting around these things. But we don't deal with them by pretending like they don't exist. If you're a Hindu, there's a lot to answer for. A lot of gods with a lot of arms. They don't make any sense. If you're an atheist, you have to figure this thing out. So if you're an atheist, your view is that in the beginning there was nothing and then it exploded. Where did the first atoms come from? Where did the first parts? Where did everything come from initially? You have to deal with those kinds of views, and you don't really actually deal with them unless you think about them. And that's the only way you can be 100% certain of it, is if you don't understand it. When you don't know what you don't know. A doctrine that's understood is shorn. It's shaped of its strength. The more you understand it, the more you understand there are weaknesses in it. And when you understand there are weaknesses in your positions, then you understand there are weaknesses in other people's positions. And when you understand there are weaknesses in your psychology, there are weaknesses in how you view the world, and you realize that there's a level of damage that's done that you've encountered in your life. Some people more, some people less. Now you understand that everybody is like this. You know? I was talking to a friend of mine this past weekend. He's 27. He's going through his second divorce. Yeah, yeah. And you know why? There's just something wrong with the women. Right?
Why with the woman?
What's that?
Why don't we win?
Because it's not his fault, that's why. I'm telling you.
No, but how do we know it's his fault?
So I'm telling you.
His friend.
Yeah.
You could be biased.
I wouldn't be his friend if he was a bad person.
You could be biased.
No.
Yeah, that's like me saying, oh, if you and your man have problems, it's your fault, bro.
Yeah.
You know? No.
Yeah, well, I'm agreeing with you. I'm wrong for agreeing with you.
No, you're being biased.
But I'm telling you.
That's being biased.
What am I supposed to do? Ask her for her side?
There's always two sides to each story. Did you ever get her side?
No, I don't need to. She's a bad person. He's my
How
friend.
do you know? What if he's lying to you, Stand-in?
Why would he lie to me? Makes no sense.
And like,
Makes
is there
no
any
sense.
context?
Context?
Yeah, just
Oh, I
context.
don't need, that confuses me. Yeah, I don't need context. I just need a reason to go after this person. There's actually three sides to every story, right? Your side, their side, and then the truth. But this is exactly my point. As I was talking with him, he's telling me how terrible she is. I always ask this one question: if she was here, what would she say was the problem? That just throws on the brakes on people. She'd probably say that she was a cheating bitch. That's what she would say. Really, she would say that. Do you think that maybe she would say that you were too self-centered, didn't focus on her, and you left her emotionally abandoned, and then somebody else was talking to her and made her feel validated as a human being?
Yeah, big purr.
Do you think that would have is maybe what happened? Or do you just think that it's as simple as you said it? Of course, people do these things for complex reasons, and I was explaining to him. Well, I don't really explain. We talk until he understands it. But he sometimes takes a while with this guy. But he understands it that I'm reacting the way that I'm reacting. He's getting into relationships he's getting into because of damage that he suffered when he was younger. I've mentioned him before, actually, to you. His father was present, but just sat on the couch. Never got a job. The only time he ever seemed to get off the couch was to criticize my friend, at least from his perspective. And again, that's all from what he's told me. So who knows how much of that is true. But his whole life seems to be jumping into relationships where he feels like he has to save somebody. Or that he can, not save somebody, sorry, where he can prove that he's a better man than his father was. And by doing that, he's not more experienced. He's more judgmental because he doesn't understand the things that damaged his father. So because he doesn't understand the things that damaged his father, he can be absolutely certain that his father was a terrible human being. And his mom actually was funny. He told me that, as I was telling him, he had a neighbor when he was growing up named Joe. And Joe would always tell him these things about, hey, you don't know what's going on with your dad, blah, blah, blah. And so his mom, he said, recently told him, listen, when you were growing up, you had a Joe, and your dad didn't. And now that you're an adult, you have a Scallon. Your dad doesn't. So your dad is damaged in these ways, but he's never had the people in his life to help him kind of get over it. And because he didn't have those people to help kind of motivate him in those directions, he just sat on the couch and did nothing. And so, yeah, you're right. We don't know if I asked the women in his life, so what happened? I bet you they'd have a whole laundry list of things that he did wrong. And then he has a whole laundry list of the things that she did wrong. The problem is that they didn't write their lists down, sit down, and go over them and talk about them and work them out. Because if you do that, well then, what's going to happen? Well, you're going to have a fight, of course. But sometimes in life you have to have a fight. You have to have little fights now so that you don't have the big one later on, which ends everything. You can, every day of your life, you have a choice. You can take a little bit of poison today, a little bit of poison today, a little bit of poison today. And what happens if you do that over time?
Eventually it's gonna catch up.
What's that?
Eventually it's gonna catch up.
It could catch up with you. That is a danger. Absolutely.
Maybe we'll strong to it.
And maybe you develop an immunity to it. Those are the two possibilities. And whatever poison that you're avoiding today, you're going to have to take a big dose of it later on. You just gotta you have to ask yourself the question of whether you want to take a big dose of poison later on that can be fatal, or take the chance of taking little doses today. It could make you stronger. It could catch up with you over time. We don't know which way it's going to go. But we do know that if you have this laundry list of things, that is going to be a big dose of poison that you're going to have to take someday. And that's when you go to a person, you give them like a whole laundry list of like 10 things that you want them to change about themselves. You ever try changing one thing about yourself? You realize how much effort that takes. Imagine if someone gives you a laundry list of 10 things to change about yourself. Can you possibly do all 10? And then if you do it at that rate, it sounds like you're saying, all of these things are terrible about you. Well, then why the hell are you with me? All of these things are terrible about me. Because I love the real you. Not the you that you are, but the you that I think I can mold you into becoming. What you're with then is a Play-Doh project. You're not with a human being. You're with something that you're trying to mold and shape. Like, oh, here's a human being. I guess they're a physical entity, so they have everything I need to work with. So you start to mold them into the thing that you want them to be. Well, then you're not dealing with a human being. You're dealing with a Play-Doh project, like I said. So, yeah, I bet if I asked the women what their list of complaints were about him, there's lots. I could probably even tell you what they are. Absolutely, I could almost probably tell you what they are. He was telling me a story about how he got very angry because he was working and they had he did a bunch of extra hours, so he decided that he wanted a video game. So he said that he told his wife to go buy a video game, and she said, we don't have the money for it this month. And he was very angry about this. He says, I work hard, I deserve a video game. If that makes sense to you, I would suggest you're probably not ready to be married. Because that's something that has to be worked out. Can you avoid a video game? Probably when you both agree that you can. Because she was handling the bills. So there were certain things there that he probably has no idea they're due. And then of course he found out later on, yeah, there were some things that he didn't know, some bills that came up and all that. But in his undeveloped, in his immature thinking, it was, but I want video game. You know, when we were little kids, we did the things of little kids. We ran, we played, we didn't think about responsibilities. But as you become older and become an adult, you have to put away the things of your childhood. That's one of the problems that we have today, is that we're incentivized in so many ways, and it's made easy for us to not put away the things of childhood, but to actually hold them and keep them with us and walk through adulthood and still continue to dress like we did when we were little kids and act like we did when we were little kids and cling to the things that we did when we were little kids, including failing to take responsibility. Because that's really the thing that makes us mature. The ability to take responsibility for things. To take on something and to see it through to completion. And so, at some point we have to put away the things of childhood. That doesn't mean that we have to grow up. It doesn't mean that we can't take the wonder and the excitement and the observations and all of these things along with us. But you'll see that those are the things that usually sink relationships. It's not the fun parts of it, it's the responsibility parts of it. So that's the thing that if I talked to them, they would probably point out. I wanted a man, I get a man-child. That's what they ended up with. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?